Awesome. Rocking and rolling. All right. Welcome to our third iteration, our third education session from H2F. I am Captain Jeremy Mullins, registered dietitian by trade. So a lot of times I do stay inside of the nutrition domain, but this is my second favorite education is sleep. Okay. Now, I like to always point out with sleep, like we try to do our best in all these domains. Sometimes we're not perfect. There are periods in our life or seasons in our life, for lack of a better terms, that maybe we can't be optimal inside a certain domain. I have a 6-week-year-old, or six, is it 6 weeks? No, not year old, 6-week old. Okay, there we go. You see, sleep deprived. A 6-week old at home. So I am in a season of life where getting the optimal amount of sleep isn't going to happen, right? Like I'm supporting getting up, helping with changes, helping with feedings, and sleep has not been the best that it can be. Now I still focus on quality, but I want us to understand that it's like no matter if I can't get a full 7 to 9 hours every night right now, I can still practice some of the things that we're going to talk about to get as good a quality as possible during that time. Okay. So first I want to start with some scare tactics of what happens if we don't get sleep, okay? So we look at a lot of times, especially nutrition and hydration, right? We can go longer without food than we could water and actually sleep, okay? And we can go longer with water than you can actually go without missing sleep. And you start looking at the data and the research in a lot of health conditions, and it is clear to us now that the amount of sleep that we get, if we're looking at it as not getting enough, negatively impacts our overall health. So we can look at, if someone, has diseases, dies early, develops diseases early on, it can be a lot of times related back to the amount of sleep that they're getting, okay? We can look at it from my standpoint that inside the nutritional space for fat loss, it has been shown that decreased sleep can increase appetite, can increase cortisol levels, can cause us to gain weight, right? So we start looking at the impact that sleep has on us, and the big takeaway is it's negative consequences of missing out on sleep, okay? And I think for this population, we unfortunately sometimes have the badge of honor, especially in our younger years, that we can go without sleep and perform, okay? And it's one of those things I think if we knew the importance of it, we would focus on it more and make it more of a priority, okay? And even in the performance world, I had a good quote by a top performer the other day. It talked about there was a discussion on performance-enhancing supplements and performance-enhancing drugs. And it was like, if we looked at sleep as something that was illegal, then it would be classified as a sports-enhancing drug because the benefits of getting sleep are so important inside of athletic performance, okay? And that's catching on a lot now where you'll see pro teams have, actually nap time, or they adjust their schedule if you have an East Coast team playing on West Coast, right? So there's a lot of factors that are going into that we are seeing that sleep matters, and sleep is very important, okay? Think short term or short thinking, like most of us, we know like, okay, if we miss sleep, we don't function mentally as good as what we do when we get it. And I don't know, for those that are on teams or even you guys, have you guys ever wore the goggles that's supposed to do the sleep deprivation where you feel like you've been drinking? So we got never. All right, so 2 out of 3 that's here. I don't know on teams if you guys have done that, but they make those. Oh, yes, we got, yes. Reply, I think they got it. We got one saying they can't hear anything. So I double check on Teams for me. So if you guys think about that, like it's a direct impact on performance that we have, right? So you can get behind, okay, once again, the scare tactics, how many accidents, motor vehicle accidents has happened secondary to lack of sleep, okay? So just kind of going in with, all right, here's the negatives of it, of sleep. I want us to realize to improve our quality of life, we need to improve our sleep quality, okay? And a lot of times I don't say quantity because I get it. We'll go through phases of life that it is tough. Doing okay? Is it everybody or maybe just one person? So while you're working on that, quick question to you guys. What is the optimal amount of sleep? What have we been told over time is that optimal amount?
I've been told 7.5 or 9, not necessarily in between, but 7.5 or 9 would be optimal.
Okay, so you've heard that? 7.5?
8 hours on.
8 to 10?
That's what they always said in school.
Okay, and then 8 hours on there. All right, somewhere around that range. I think 8 hours is probably the most common one I hear when I ask that question. But it depends would be the big answer, right? Are you recovering from energy or an injury? Are you sleep deprived? Going into, how much sleep do you need? How old are you? Because at different phases of our life, we need more sleep versus we're not. How much are we working out? So there's a lot of times it depends going into what is optimal sleep, but most of the time the literature is going to give us 7 to 9 hours. That is where we see, okay, optimal sleep is somewhere between 7 and 9 hours. And I get it. Right now you're thinking, especially on the upper end of that, 9 hours, very difficult to get in, right? What I always like to look at is what's more important than getting 7 to 9 hours is making sure that the quality of the 7 to 9 hours is as best as we can. And this is where we get into a little bit of information of sleep, okay? So we have 4 stages of sleep. The first one always is like confusing to me because it is the stage awake. So it's like, okay, well, if you're awake, is that really a sleep stage? But it is that moment where you're still awake, but you're dozing off, right? So it is considered a sleep stage. The heart rate is coming down, breathing is slowing down, but you are technically still awake, okay? So awake is considered a stage. Light sleep is considered a stage. Deep sleep, and then our REM stage, R-E-M. So those are our 4 stages: awake, light, deep, and REM sleep, okay? Some definitions of that REM you may know or may not know is rapid eye movement. So that is our REM stage, okay? Deep sleep and light sleep. Deep is a deeper sleep, of course, where it is very difficult to get awake or be awakened up in that state. If you've ever been awakened when you're in the deep sleep, it is where you really have that foggy, like maybe you don't know where you're at for a moment, you can't wake up right away. That means you have been asleep and waken up inside of that stage, okay? In an ideal world, what happens is we go through these stages multiple times during the night, and during that light stage at the end of the cycle, we then get awake, okay? Now, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way all the time, but I want you guys to understand what are the 4 stages, and we're going to go over the benefits of them, okay? On Teams, just to make sure that we're interactive here, so on Teams, what is rapid eye movement, or what is the benefits of the rapid eye movement and the deep sleep? So on Teams, looking for that answer on that side of it, and then I'll ask my attendees that are here, what have you been told or what do we know about the benefits of deep sleep and REM sleep?
Your body recovers the most.
Okay, so when a body recovers the most, I would agree with that as a blanket statement. So deep sleep and REM sleep, you get better recovery than light sleep, right? So if we just broke that down and kept it simple, the more deep in REM we get versus light, the better, okay?
What about serotonin levels? Does that help? I'm asking, I don't know.
Yeah, well, so with serotonin levels, doesn't affect the stages necessarily when we're in.
They improve?
Yes, if we can increase serotonin, right, then we're likely to get more of those stages. Yep, so it is a connection. Anything from Teams before I...
Full REM/lucid dreaming.
Correct. So rapid eye movement is where you have your dreams. So rapid eye movement, if you've ever seen like your child or your significant other sleeping and you catch your eyes half open, you see the boom. So that is where you dream at. You have the lucid dreams, okay?
Facebook is not related to what the question just was.
Okay.
And you got someone messaging on Teams.
Awesome. Do you want to add anything to what they've said? Cool. So I like that we're around it, and it's correct, okay? So the deep sleep and the REM sleep are the 2 most important stages, right? In the sense of recovery, okay? What I want you to understand, the deep sleep, that is when you physically recover. So if we're speaking of it from like a physical standpoint of training, right? We break the muscle tissues down in our exercise sessions. When we recover is at night when we're sleeping. The deep sleep stage is when we release our natural levels of testosterone and growth hormone. So a negative consequence of not sleeping, not getting to deep sleep, is you do not produce the hormonal levels that you should produce, testosterone, growth hormone. This is very evident in people who are sleep deprived a lot in our special forces units. They will come off and have really low testosterone levels coming out of high tempo operations because the sleep is very low. Okay? So know that deep sleep stage is where we physically recover our tissues because we're releasing testosterone and growth hormone at, once again, natural levels. Okay? So that's going to optimize performance, optimize recovery. Okay? Flip over to rapid eye movement. This is where you still recover, but you're recovering mentally. Okay? This is where we can improve not only short-term memory, but long-term memory. So the things that we read that day, the things that we studied that day, when we get optimal REM sleep, we are able to remember it and put it into memory much better. Okay? It also allows the mind from stress standpoint. So when we're high stressed, right? And a lot of people get this where it negatively impacts sleep, right? So we can't turn our mind off is what we hear. Can't turn our mind off, right? So that is a lot just stress because we're thinking about things. If we get that optimal amount of REM sleep, we can recover from that. We can take on more stress the next day without negative consequences from a mental standpoint. And as previous mentioned, you miss out on REM sleep, you kind of feel drunk the next day. You just don't, your motor functions aren't as well, that type of stuff, okay? So deep sleep and REM state are very important, okay? Which backs it up to, all right, going back, if we want 7 to 9 hours, I get it, we're busy, right? Most of us that are in attendance are adults, so 7 hours would kind of be that sweet spot. We said, okay, what's the minimum amount we need? 7 hours. Then if we broke it down to needing at least 20% of the 7 hours from deep and REM respectively, okay, that's roughly 40%. So we're looking at somewhere around an hour and a half each of those stages, okay? And a lot of the things that we'll cover today is going to be on sleep hygiene where you can get good quality sleep in less than 7 hours, okay? So if you're able to track your sleep and you only get 5 hours, but you get an hour and a half of REM and an hour and a half of deep in 5 hours because the quality is good, then you're recovering and you're sleeping maybe better than someone getting 8 hours that doesn't get into those sleep stages. And that's probably one of the biggest takeaways that I like to teach because I get it. As adults, as having responsibilities, sometimes we don't get the full amount of sleep, but if we can focus on the quality and improve the quality, we can improve our health and our life. Okay? So 7 to 9 hours is what we go for total, but the caveat there is I want to focus on getting the REM and the deep at the hour and a half-ish mark, right? 3 hours of deep and REM. Now, the next thing you probably think is, how do I track that, right? There are wearables that you can get. I know a lot of Fitbits, they track sleep now. So Fitbits, Garmin's, Whoop, you can get multiple ways to track your sleep to see where you're landing in these items, okay? Questions on that?
Does iWatch have that as an app? iWatch?
Like yeah, they may. I think so. That's where I don't have I know the ones I wear, can like a Garmin and the Whoop apparatuses will track sleep, but I don't know about. I've never had the iWatch, but they may. Questions on?
On Facebook,
Yeah.
do you get the same quality of rest if the 8-ish hours of sleep happen during the daytime instead of night?
It can be under some of the things as we slide into sleep hygiene, yes, right? But there will be some stuff that we'll talk about. For example, if someone is on a night shift and they're having to sleep during the day, it's going to be very important that they get the darked out curtains to make sure no light is coming in. And we'll talk about how that can affect the stages here in a second. So yes, if the quality and the atmosphere of the environment, aka the bedroom, is as good as the night would be the caveat with that. So, cool. So takeaways, 7 to 9 total hours is what we're shooting for, but you can get by with less if we start practicing some of the techniques we're getting ready to talk about, because that'll still allow you to get the good REM and the good deep and allow yourself to get those stages up in maybe less amount of sleep. Okay? So first and foremost, let's start talking about sleep hygiene. Fancy term, right? It is habits. And the cool thing about it, but the hard thing about it is none of these are hard. It's just tough to do them. Okay? None of them are hard physically. It's just very hard to do them in the sense of life is busy, we've got a lot going on, and it's hard to be disciplined to the actions. Okay? So first and foremost, we want to try to have the same routine. You've probably heard before, we need to go to bed around the same time, get up around the same time. Okay? Let me narrow that down even a little bit more. That is within 60 to 90 minutes. So you want to try to go to bed around the same time frame within an hour to hour and a half and get up around the same time. The reason we do that is our bodies run off of an internal clock you've probably heard called the circadian rhythm. So if our circadian rhythm is on, then we have a tendency as we lay down or we start to rest, we will fall asleep faster. We will get into the sleep cycle stages faster, therefore getting more deep and more REM. Okay? This is why sometimes maybe if you don't get a lot of sleep during the week and you try to sleep in on the weekends, you feel a little bit more sluggish and kind of out of rhythm because your body actually does better on kind of the same rhythm there. Okay? Now, I am okay, once again, if you sleep an hour, half extra on the weekends to catch up a little bit if you're not getting the sleep during the week. But you do want to kind of keep it within the same window as possible. Okay, so same time. You want to make sure that you have a cold environment. Okay, and I understand with this, we have spouses that maybe don't like it cold or they want it warmer. I get it. But ideally, you are sleeping somewhere around 66 to 68 degrees. That is ideal temperature to sleep at, okay? Now, if the significant other wants it warmer, then you may have to do a fan, you may have to do something to cool it down. But if we're talking about, okay, what is optimal sleep? It is around 66 to 68 degrees. And the reason being, your body temperature actually has to drop about a degree to get into the deep sleep stage. So if any of you have tried to maybe like take a camp, camping's a good one, right? Or AT in hot weather, you just don't sleep very well, right? So, having a cool room if feasible. Next up, should be feasible for most of us, our dark room. So cutting out all light inside of your room. Having blacked out curtains, this goes back to the question on Facebook. If I get 8 hours in the day, is that the same as 8 hours at night? Yes, if we can make our environment mimic what it would be at dark. Okay? We as humans, genetically, okay, if you go back in time, we did not work night shifts. We did not work, we got up when it was daylight. We went to bed when it was dark. That's the way our bodies are wired, okay? So we have to mimic that sleep environment to make it as dark as possible. One study I always like to mention was a pen light study. They took a pen light, put it on the back of subjects' legs when they were sleeping, and when they put the pen light on their leg, it would knock them out of deep sleep or REM sleep and put them into light sleep. Reason being, when the body senses light, the way we are genetically made, the body thinks that it's what? Daylight. It's time to do what? Wake up. So when your body senses light in the night, TVs, night lights, that type, any lights, then it will knock you out of your deep sleep and your REM sleep and put you into light sleep. So I'm not saying it's waking you up. It's not that you wake up because of it. You're still asleep, but you're not getting the quality of sleep. So making sure that your room is darked out. So when I travel in a hotel room, I'll always put a towel over the microwave light, over the alarm clock, and in front of the door, at the bottom of the door. So it blocks all that light coming in. Also, when I travel, they pay the bill, so you can turn it down to 66 degrees and not have to worry about it, right? So making sure that your environment is, cool and dark if possible, okay? Next one's the tough one, and I get it. I work a lot from my phone. I work a lot mobile. Try to limit screen time 90 minutes before bed. So try to limit screen time 90 minutes before bed. Reason being is the blue light that our screens put off. When your screens put off this blue light, it's going to prevent you from releasing the serotonin, which we talked about earlier. That's important to get us into those stages. So the more blue light we have, the less of that we're going to release. Okay? If you have to be on it, the great thing now, once again, technology is cool, They make blue blocking glasses that you can wear the blue blocking glasses while you're on your phone or on your computer if you need to be on it. So those can aid if you just can't, once again, eliminate it for 90 minutes. All right? Yes, ma'am.
When you say screen time, do you include television?
Yeah, everything. Great question. So the question was for those that are on Teams on Facebook, do we include TV with that? And it's 100% yes, right? So, and once again, we're talking about optimizing, right? So on Friday night, if you watch, a family watches a movie together and goes to sleep, probably not that big of a deal. But if we're doing that day in and day out, then it is going to impact us over time, okay? And the cool thing is, like, they make these blue blocking glasses for kids. So after a certain time, like we have the same rule in the house for our kids too. After a certain time, hey, you're going to throw your glasses on if you're going to be on your tablet or if we're going to watch a movie.
Where do you get those at?
Amazon. Yeah, the great thing about them is you don't have to spend a lot of money for them. It's like a lot of things that you don't. Please don't spend a lot of money on the blue blocking glasses. They got them out there that they're fairly cheap. Yep. So kind of go back to the environment. That's the first thing you're thinking about, your sleep hygiene. What is my bedroom at, right? I try, to have the bedroom for sleeping and then other things you do in the bedroom. There's two things, right? Try not to have any TV. Try not to eat. Maybe read. That one's iffy. I could see some winding down time. But what you want to do is, like, your body, you want to know that when you're going to bed, that it's bedtime. When you start doing other things, watching TV, reading, that type of stuff, then our bedroom doesn't become that conducive environment for optimal sleep. Okay? Some things that can help. Cold showers or cool showers. It doesn't have to be ice cold. A cool shower, because once again, it kind of helps your body temperature go down. For some people, reading does help. It allows the mind to slow down. Some people like to journal, practice gratitude, deep breathing. Some of the things that we've learned maybe from our resilience courses, like you can add that in that kind of help us slow the brain down. I am a big fan of magnesium at night. So taking magnesium, which is a mineral, will allow the muscles to relax. So if we're looking at from a training aspect, working out aspect, relaxing your muscles allows you to get into that deep sleep stage, okay? That's especially effective if anybody's had like cramps at night or anything like that. Then you start getting into some one-offs, right? Maybe we do look at having 3 grams of melatonin to increase serotonin. But those I like to talk about and have after we get the simple basics down, okay? Going to bed around the same time, getting up around the same time, making sure the environment is cool, dark, and we limit screen time. Those are the biggest, quote, bang for your buck you can get to improve sleep, okay? 2 more education points, and then we could take Q&A. Alcohol impedes sleep, okay? As much as I hate it to tell you that, and listen, this is not the first time I've done this lecture. I want to make sure that I'm very clear on this. When I say do not drink before bed, I am not telling you to go day drink. But if you have your drink, say, with dinner at 5:30 versus having a nightcap at 8:30, that same amount of alcohol is going to affect your sleep when you have it at 8:30 versus 4:30. Okay? So if you are going to have a drink, you enjoy to have a drink, try to have it earlier in the evening with dinner versus having it late at night. Because until your body processes the alcohol off, which is a poison to the body, it will prevent you from getting into the deep sleep and the REM sleep. Okay? The next one's caffeine. Try, and this is generic because once again, we all have different wake cycles. So I'm speaking of the average person, who works at 8 to 4, 7 to 3, 9 to 5, somewhere in that range job. A good rule of thumb is try not to have caffeine after 12 o'clock. Allowing your body to process all the caffeine out, so not having caffeine in the second part of the day so that you don't have the caffeine in your system, okay? Because unfortunately, everybody has a different process rate of caffeine. There's a different half-life for each person. Some people can have that longer half-life where caffeine at 1 o'clock, still half of that is in their system when they're trying to go to bed at 8 and 9 o'clock. So those are 2 things that I've learned. I've learned specifically for me by studying sleep on myself, the alcohol affects me big time. If I have a bourbon at night at 8:30, 9 o'clock, right before I'm getting ready to go to bed, it impedes my sleep. I will lose 20%, 30% of my deep in my REM. If I have it in the evening before dinner maybe, or as I'm fixing dinner for the family, no effect on sleep, because it gives me an extra 4 hours to process the alcohol before going to sleep. So those are two big ones that I think that I always like to add into this brief, because we drink coffee, we maybe have some drinks every now and again, and we have to learn how to work that into our lifestyle. Okay? Open Q&A on sleep. We can touch anything. Supplements, things you've heard, things you do, all the good stuff.
What is the appropriate amount of melatonin to take you through taking it?
Awesome. So appropriate amount of melatonin. I would say for the average person, somewhere between 3 and 10 grams. It varies from person to person on what works best. The great thing about melatonin is it is short term. And I know a lot of people, if you struggle a little bit with waking up in the middle of the night, you could keep a little bit of melatonin on the nightstand, and then that way if you wake up, take a little bit, and it's such a short half-life, it'll help you go to sleep, but it won't impede you as far as waking up. Now, any sleep aid, except for magnesium, I'm pretty comfortable, because I recommend magnesium to everybody from the quote my dietitian standpoint, because I see that we are just low in that mineral and it has such positive benefits. Magnesium, I would say, hey, start it now as a sleep aid. But I'm very cautious about talking about sleep aids until you fix your behavior, because taking melatonin is just a Band-Aid if you're not going to get off your phone. You're not going to quit drinking your coffee at 4 o'clock in the evening. Okay? And I'm not saying he does these things. I'm just using that as an example. Yeah, but somewhere between 3 and 10. Start with the smaller dose and see how it affects you, and then kind of find the optimal amount for you.
You mentioned dinner earlier at 5:30 for your family. What's the latest you should eat dinner?
Great question. So I think this is individual, and the data, so there is a PhD exercise physiologist at FSU who's doing a lot of studying on nighttime food and positive sleep, because eating some carbohydrate, and this kind of links over to nutrition. This kind of links over to why we crave simple carbohydrates maybe if we're feeling bad. So if we eat simple carbohydrates, when we eat carbs, we have a slight increase in serotonin. Makes us feel good. So there is some data at having some carbohydrate later at night with some protein can actually aid sleep. If you eat too much, too big of a meal, it impedes sleep. So that one is, I do not have a hard stance on you need to eat at this time and you need to eat this amount, because it's different with every person. But I would play around with it, right? What you don't want to do is eat late and eat a large amount, because then you could have some GI issues, because you're not going to digest it as well, and it could wake you up during the night. But there is some data out there that having 30 to 40 grams of carbohydrate an hour or so before bed helps increase serotonin a little bit and helps you sleep a little bit. Okay, just make sure you work that 30 to 40 grams of carbs in your diet. Can't leave my other domain too much there, right? So
if you have a spouse that likes her heated bed mattress,
yeah.
How do you navigate that? How do you navigate
You're gonna have to hopefully buy one that has both, right?
buy one that has a cooling?
Yeah, so great point. So the question was, the spouse likes the heating mattress, entire mattress. They make some things you can look at. They make some weighted blankets. I tried those. It was okay. So if you toss and turn a lot, weighted blankets can aid in sleep. They do make sleeping pads that are cooled. So you can get a sleeping pad and put on your side of the bed. They make cooled blankets. So there is some stuff like that you can look at, kind of split the difference. You can put a fan on your side to blow air to cool you down. So those are some things that you could do. The cooling blanket I have and I really enjoy, especially now, like I said, with the baby, we have to keep it a little bit. We're doing like 69, 70 degrees, but usually we will do the lowers. Like both of us are okay with that. But now I have a cooling blanket that I use since the temperature is a little bit higher. It's a good question. Nothing? Any on Facebook? Okay. Anything you can think of? As you guys are thinking, another teaching cue from nutrition and stress. missing out on sleep increases cortisol levels. So when you go and you have, you miss out on half your sleep, your cortisol levels are cranked up the next day. And these increase in cortisol levels actually make you insulin resistant. So you will act, and your body will act just like a diabetic when you only get, say, 3 or 4 hours of sleep for the first 4 to 6 hours of the day until that cortisol level starts to come back down because of missing sleep. Okay? But that's in an ideal world, because if you miss sleep, then you get to work, you might have another episode at work that causes a stress to increase cortisol levels again. So that's where, like, we start looking at sleep. Sleep is going to allow us to recover from all the stresses that we occur during the day. Whether those stresses are mentally, whether they are physically, it is our time to wash things off and to recover. Okay? So that's just one example of how, like, hormonal we can be affected, and have increase in cortisol levels because of the lack of sleep.
Is there a good coffee substitute you recommend? I would like to try and stop drinking
Coffee. So I'm assuming to sub out the coffee, we're trying to sub out the caffeine. So I'm a big stair stepper off caffeine. If you've been, and I'm not against caffeine. That is one of the quote things. When you miss out on sleep, you can do a small dose of caffeine to make it through the day, still perform well. But what happens, we're human. What we do is we miss sleep, and we're like, well, we'll just have more caffeine. And then, I got by that day with X amount of sleep. I'll just continue having more caffeine, right? But if we want to low dose ourselves off caffeine, you can go cold turkey, which a lot of people struggle with. Or with the coffee analogy, is we can start with 3/4 of the coffee and 1/4 decaf, and slowly work down and go to decaf coffee, and progress down off the caffeine. If you just want to get rid of the coffee in general, then I would recommend just a slow taper off of it and then eventually go away from it. Natural caffeine, we're looking at teas and coffee are the natural caffeines, in my opinion, because every other caffeine is going to come in pre-workouts, energy drinks, that type of stuff. And I would rather someone have the coffee than I would energy drink. So I would do a stair step down of regular coffee into decaf, eventually weaning yourself off of that. But remember, nothing wrong with a little half caffeine if you drink caffeine. Nothing wrong with that. We're there? We good there? Good there?
You mentioned about the quality sleep, and ideally you want 5 hours, but that five,
Mhm.
I guess what is the least amount that you can get to still be able to get by if you have 4 hours on the training? You gotta have like 4 hours ideally.
And this is me speaking from a personal experience. The best that I've ever done is like a 3 hour and 40-ish minute night of sleep, but still had an hour and a half each of deep and REM. But usually it's not like that, right? Sometimes if I get into a good routine, and I can do 6 hours consistently, go to bed around the same time, get up around the same time, and I've got all these things in the play, then I can consistently get that 3 hours of deep and REM on 5.5 and 6 hours. Right now, that's not the case, because it's not like my sleep right now is because the baby's getting up at odd hours, not because I'm in school or I got an extra class that I'm doing, or where the schedule's just busy. And you can be like, okay, it's go to bed at 12 and get up at 5, right? Because that routine's the same. So, it's going to be different for each person. And going back to the wearables, I want you to understand wearables, there's still a standard deviation that goes with each wearable, okay? So don't get caught up in what you're tracking with. Get caught up in, when I changed behavior X, Y, and Z, I saw improvement of sleep. That's what I want you to get caught up in. Because even when I take my Garmin off when I breathe so it doesn't buzz, my Garmin and my Whoop do not have the same data. It gives me different numbers. What they both do, though, is when I drink that bourbon late, both of them have worse numbers. So don't get caught up in my exact numbers I'm giving you, as much as looking at the behaviors that we've talked about and seeing how it improves your numbers. And if you're not a technology person, go by the subjective, like, how do I feel? How is my mood? How much coffee did I have to drink to get ready for the day? Like, those are all things that you can subjectively ask yourself, based on the sleep that you're getting.
You mentioned about age earlier and how the different stages of life need more or less sleep.
Yeah.
So someone is in their mid-50s, how much?
Yeah, I do not have that memorized. Is it like we know as like teenagers and children, they're going to need more sleep than us, and then as you age, you actually need a little bit less, and there is a tipping point where then you need more. But I do not have that memorized.
That's okay.
It's a good question that I'll look up to have, but yeah, I don't have it, right? But we know that injuries are going to increase the amount of sleep that we need. We know that certain stresses will increase, and sleep depth will increase. Okay, so sleep depth means okay, I'm sleep deprived. You can make up short-term sleep depth. You cannot make up a long-term. So I can make up coming in town. Hopefully my wife's not on here. She's not on Teams, is she? Okay. I can make up sleep when I'm here, right? Because I don't have that responsibility. I can just go home and then at 8:30 last night I'm out, okay? So that makes up for maybe the 2 or 3 nights before. But I can't make up for the month before that. That damage has already been done, right? So you can make up for short-term sleep deprivation by getting a little bit more sleep. And that's where, going back to earlier what I was saying is, yes, feel free to sleep in the weekend, that extra hour and a half if you haven't been getting. But try not to make it 2 or 3 hours because that'll actually throw off your cycle and make you feel a little bit worse than just an hour in, okay? And then on those wearables, make sure you're watching the trend and not getting caught up in the direct data on there, okay? Because I'll have some that just don't read as high. And I've had, clients come in and it's like, Jeremy, I'm doing everything that you said. I'm getting 9 hours. I feel great. But my Fitbit or my Garmin or my fill in the blank, I can never get over an hour and a half of deep. Okay, that's just a wearable in numbers. You feel great. You're getting 8+ hours. Everything else is going well in your life. Let's not stress about that data, right? But what she wasn't looking at, or he wasn't looking at, was the fact that in the beginning it said only 30 minutes of deep sleep, and now it was showing an hour. But they were more stressed on me saying, well, it should be an hour and a half versus looking at how it improved and how you feel. Okay? So don't get too caught up in it if you do have the wearables that give you that data. Sweet. Awesome. So for those that are on Teams, sleep is kind of straightforward. I think it's one of the simple domains of H2F, but I think it is the one that probably needs the most improvement around the board. And what I mean by that is I'll see some people who have optimized some of the other domains. They are resilient individuals, right? Mentally, physically, like nutrition, they got all that lined in, and then they're burning the candle at both ends, right? So I see that probably sleep is the one that we don't talk about as much. It's still the badge of honor in our subculture that we can get by on not getting as much sleep, and we can still get X amount done. But what I want you to do, just like with in nutrition, is I want to educate you. I want you to be aware of it. I want you to play around with it and find what works for you, okay? Find what works for you. And I'll leave you with this. Like I had someone be like, well, Jeremy, for years I've slept with the TV on. And I'm like, okay, if you do everything else that we're talking about, the sleep hygiene, you go to bed around the same time, you practice all this good stuff and you sleep with your TV on and you get 7 to 8 hours, I'm good with that. Because you practiced all the other stuff and you know what works for you, okay? So that's kind of the big takeaway from it. But I hope you guys implement some of these, sleep hygiene techniques, see how and notice the difference, and then it pays dividends into what you're doing, from that aspect. So, teams, if you need anything, reach out to me. Do you care about my email in the chat? So if you guys need questions on sleep, recommendation on wearables, or if you already got a wearable and you want to go over the data, you guys reach out to me. Same thing for you guys. If you got the wearables, you want to look at it. I don't have you can start all of these. It's not like a new kid trying one fruit and then the next fruit or next veggie to see what tolerate. I would be okay if you went out and started implementing all of these, right? You don't have to do one at a time to see, well, which one of these really help. Like just rip the Band-Aid off, do all the sleep hygiene techniques at once. But it is kind of cool to see, some of the ones, especially like the alcohol and the caffeine that may affect you directly. So, awesome. Remote people, Thanks for coming in. If you guys do need anything, let me know. Over and out.